Welcome back to North Wales and a series that will showcase some of the best scenery from mountains to coastlines through to the area's heritage, stunning hikes and nature at its best. If you've missed the last couple of episodes, I've wandered around Bodnant Gardens in awe of the colours and laced up the hiking shoes to explore the beautiful gorge, pretty village and made it into the hills to find remnants of an old ropeway. I've conquered the Glidders on an epic all-day hike and explored abandoned copper mines, coastal brickworks and lighthouses on the Isle of Anglesey. Spurred on by the fascination of yesterday's abandoned mine, today I'll be hiking through the deserted Vivian and Dinorwic Quarries with a pit stop in Lllanberis for lunch. If during the video you find yourself enjoying it, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel so that you can join me in my North Wales adventures. This morning we've come along to Vivian Quarry on the western side of Snowdonia National Park. There's a really nice circular trail that takes us through a country park that's got excellent waymarked trails, so we'll go and have a little bit of an explore. Crazy to me is walking around seeing the quarry in the hillsides looking like this is that once upon a time, before the quarry was actually dug away, as you can see today, this hillside would have looked exactly the same as all of the other ones, including Snowdon with their green slopes. And why was it that they chose this one and not the other ones? Maybe the slate was a little bit better quality on this hill, but how did they know? We appear to have a road blockage and it's goats, wild mountain goats. Thankfully, there was a mountain biker who came hurtling down the track. I think because they were travelling at such a fast speed and making quite a lot of noise on the ground, the goats got up very quickly and moved out of the way. So we saw it as our opportunity to also slide on by, only just to very quickly realise that we'd actually taken a wrong turn. We didn't need to go down that path, so we had to very quickly turn around and get back up past them before they spread out across the path again. But I believe that we're now on the right track and we are now heading down the hillside. Unlike the mine that we visited yesterday on Anglesey, there's very little signs letting us know what the deal is and what's going on, and we've been debating as we've come down what these tracks here are for. We're not too sure if it might have been to take the miners up or if it was perhaps to bring the slate back down. If you think you might know, or if you want to hazard a guess, please do let me know in the comments below. Two rows of 11 cottages that you can see were built back in 1870, and they were built specifically for quarrymen who lived over in Anglesey, and the commute would have been too far to have come in and out to work at the quarry each day. Instead, the men lived in these cottages Monday through Friday and returned back to their families on the weekends. The quality of the build of these cottages were terrible, very drafty and often let in the elements. But with workers unable to find employment over in Anglesey, this was often a bad situation that was better than being left unemployed. We are allowed inside the Quarrymen's cottages, which have fallen into absolute ruins now. They were 2-roomed, very, very small cottages, and I can only imagine that I must be standing in the living room at the moment. You can see you've got a chimney up at the top, so I can only assume that this here must have been the fireplace. Thinking about how living rooms are in the UK, probably bookshelves on either side, somewhere to store the wood or the coal, depending on what they use to burn in the fire. And then there's a doorway that leads through to the second room within the cottages. And so this is even smaller than the living room. And I don't know if this is either the bedroom or potentially some kind of kitchen, or if there's maybe communal kitchens. I would assume that back in the 1800s that there was definitely no internal bathroom. This feels, I guess, a little bit like a London flat. They're making them smaller and smaller, and I think it's really interesting how these were built for the quarrymen workers who needed to live here Monday through Friday, and then they'd return home on the weekends to their families. And again, it's a very London thing to do that, to have a tiny studio apartment, and then on the weekends London workers will often return back to the countryside to the rest of their families. It's weird how we've moved on centuries and yet there's still so many things that are being mimicked to hundreds of years ago. Brought us down into Lllanberis, which is where we've stopped off for a quick bite to eat for lunch. I was fortunate enough to be able to try a Welsh rabbit. I've had a Welsh burger, but it was specifically a Welsh lamb burger because I don't eat beef. And then we found this really old retro caravan that's been done up and turned into this coffee kiosk. And so I've just had an amazing affogato for dessert, and hopefully I've now got the calories needed to get us back up this slate quarry. This walk was recommended to me by someone on one of the Facebook groups that I'm part of for hiking in Britain. The photographs that I then went on to Google looked absolutely stunning of this part of the hike, specifically down there in the quarry. We've had a bit of a wander around trying to work out how we can get down there, and underneath where I'm currently stood there's a big gate closing it all off, and so we've given up. We've come back up, and just as we got back up to this viewing point, a local gentleman walked past, and very helpfully he explained about 3 years ago there was quite a significant rock fall. So on the second tier up, where you've got the brown and green in the rock, that's where a bit had fallen away. They did have some people come in and do a health and safety assessment where they fed back saying it's fine, it's pretty stable, it's not going to give way again, and so they let people back in. But unfortunately, just a matter of months ago, another very, very large piece of rock broke away. So if you look up an extra tier, so 3 tiers up, where there's a bit of a difference in the rock colour, that entire slab came away and obviously went crashing down. It's not possible for the likes of us to be able to go down to take any photographs or anything like that. So whilst it has been a really spectacular hike, and it's been very, very different to I think any hikes that I've done previously, this has been a slight disappointment because I just had no idea that all of this was shut off, and this was obviously like one of the biggest selling points of this hike. But that's okay, we'll keep on wandering and hopefully there'll be a bit more to see on the way back up the hillside. Just sitting down for a quick 5-minute breather and just to top up with our water, and we've just been sat staring at this structure and I realised that there is a tree growing out of the top of it, so it probably gives some indication as to just how old the structure is, because whilst it's obviously not the widest of trees, probably not the oldest, it's still pretty established. This hike seems to be something of an adventurer's dream. I think they've just completely thrown health and safety out of the window. They've still got all of these structures, you've got the cables still running loose, and this just goes to like a sheer drop off because of the terraces that this whole quarry is set on. From a health and safety point of view, yes, probably very, very dangerous, but I think it's wonderful to still have places like this in the UK where you can just come and explore and just use your own head. Don't get too close to the edge and you'll be fine. Just come up above the tree line for a brief moment, and the view, whilst it's very, very pretty, it's making me realise that we parked the car considerably higher than this. So I suppose all of that easy downhill this morning, when you go down you got to come back up at some point, and it's starting to rain just a little bit right now, but I think I'd rather that than the beating sun on us whilst we're going up steps like this. We've now just walked across the top of the quarry, so we're back on the east side of it, but unfortunately from the top you're not able to see down to the water. We've now made it back to where we parked the car at the start of the Vivian Quarry hike. It would have been perfect timing. We just were approaching the car as the heavens started to get a little bit more heavy. But then when we got to this green where I think the local council have put down some rather delicious plants for the mountain goats, we found a whole herd of them. So I've braved the getting wet because it was definitely worth it just to watch their antics. They were having a little bit of rough and tumble, and some of them going up on their hind legs to try and get some of the leaves from the lower branches. It's been a fantastic hike, one that I would highly recommend, despite it obviously not being one of the really, really well known ones such as Trevan, Snowdon and the Glidders.